Good day, Dr. Latif. Today we are going to present the research paper on the topic of commitment. And over here, I have my teammates, Xinjie, Lydia, Hui Min, and Xinghua, and together with me, Chu Ching. So we'll be presenting on this topic. So for the introduction, we've talked about religion. So religion basically is a system of beliefs, practice, and values that shapes a person's life, meaning, and purpose, and it involves belief in supernatural entities. And then for religious commitment, it is primarily the engagement with religion through following the doctrines and principles. And the examples are like attending service, obeying laws, and participating in communities. And as for the religious context in Malaysia, Islam, of course, is the official religion, but citizens also have the freedom to choose to believe in other religions. And there's a religious diversity in Kuala Lumpur, particularly because we see buildings like mosques, temples, churches, and shrines. Although religious communities in KL frequently engage in social outreach programs, questions still remain about how consistent religious commitment is in making moral choices. So this raised concerns about the gap between belief and practice. So our research project aims to explore the relevance of religious commitment to moral behavior among citizens of KL. And the contribution of this research paper will actually help us to better understand how religion functions as a moral force in KL. So for the problem statement, we see that religion has become increasingly insignificant in the Malaysian society because we are multiracial and multicultural, and we continue to modernize. So although religion influences many decisions that individuals make, people's stance on religion's commitment is still very much warped and very different. So a person's moral compass, we know that it's mostly determined by religion, and the behaviors that people exhibit reflects their level of religious commitment. And we see that youths in Malaysia gradually become less religious and they even abandon their religious commitments. So it is important for us to dissect the relationship between religious commitment and moral behavior because they influence the social harmony in Malaysia.
So I will talk about literature review. So for Islamic perspective on commitment, so for organization commitment in Islam is a stabilizing force to bind individuals to responsibilities, which includes of effective continuance and normative commitment. And this is being strengthened by the principle of taqwa, which including the Islamic spirituality and also the Islamic social responsibility. So for spiritual applications include the prayer, tithes, and also Hajj to Mecca, fasting and belief to attain Allah approval in life and work. So for Islamic work ethic, IWE is to will work as both ibadah and also jihad. So work is billed as a devotion to Allah. It's a form of service to serve God, which requires sincerity, excellence, hard work, honesty, and accountability. So you can see these two sentences, and Islam encouraging seeking Allah reward through work, making it both a livelihood and a path to spiritual growth. And the values of work lies in intention and also sincerity to ensure that the actions align with the divine principle and lead to success in this life and the hereafter. So for the Islamic work ethics is rooted in the Al-Quran and to promote the integrity, diligence, and stuff like that. So next. So for Buddhist perspective on commitment, is nurtured through the ethical living, emotional balance, and mindful engagement in work. And it is strengthened by the spiritual principle, which is the Noble Eightfold Path, Four Immeasurable, and the Threefold Training. And this Buddhist ethics is to promote emotional stability, ethical awareness, accountability, and loyalty among the employee. And also it allows flexible moral practice and it guided by the principle of avoiding harm. So in Malaysia, Buddhist principle extend beyond the personal practice into the active participations in Buddhist organizations. For example, the Zhu's engage in the charity during COVID-19, which is to translate the spiritual values into the tangible contributions to society. So for this, such involvement strengthen the spiritual development, ethical standards, and collective organizational commitment. Next. So for Christian perspective on commitment, is grounded in the biblical virtue and the call to serve. And it is strengthened by the Christian's spiritual principle, which is fruit of the spirit, moral excellence, and virtue, and Christ-centered leadership ethics. For this principle, is to foster the trust, ethical decision making, emotional stability, compassion, and accountability to create a workplace culture of respect and cooperation. So for Christian ethics is to promote loyalty, moral responsibility, and fairness while inspiring leaders to balance the organizational goals with the well-being of others. So for this faith-based leadership is to transform work into a form of service to God. And it also guided by the church teaching and spiritual counseling. So believer manage stress through trust in God, balance work-life priorities, and will their professions as part of God's missions to strengthen the workplace dedications, ethical conduct, and also the long-term organizational commitment.
I will continue with the literature review section. When it comes to Islam, most of the literature agrees that religious belief is closely connected to good moral behavior. For example, Islamic teachers are seen as role models, and Malay Muslim culture often highlights values like patience and humility. But here's the thing, many studies just assume this connection without really proving it. They don't give a clear evidence about how young Muslims in cities today actually behave. Also, a lot of the research focuses only on Islam and doesn't compare with how youth in other religions behave morally. Next, please. In Buddhism, moral behavior really try to compassion and mindfulness. You can definitely see this in the real life with groups like Chuchi that are out there actively helping others and promoting ethical values. But the thing is, a lot of the research we have tend to focus on older generations or just isolated examples. What we are really missing is a deeper understanding of how young people in Kuala Lumpur, most of whom haven't had formal Buddhist education, actually think about and live out these values in their everyday lives. Okay, next one. Basically, Christianity promotes strong moral values like love, honesty, and kindness. These ideas are definitely taught in churches and young youth programs. But when we actually look at the research, it turns out that a lot of Christian youth don't always live by those values in real life. One big issue is that most studies just focus on what young people say about their beliefs, not what they actually do day to day, especially in places like Kuala Lumpur. There's not a lot of research looking at how Christian teens actually act out these morals in the real world. So that leaves a pretty big gap in understanding what's really going on. So basically, when we look at Islam, Buddhism, and Christianity side by side, most of the literature agrees that having religious faith does help encourage moral behavior. But there is a thing, a lot of studies just focus on one religion at a time. There's not much research that puts them side by side, especially for youth people in diverse city like Kuala Lumpur. That's why we are doing is important. That's why we want to fill the gap by seeing how young Muslims, Buddhists, and Christians in KL understand and live out their moral values. By comparing them, we get a big idea of differences and similarities in modern urban setting. In today's fast-changing world, just being religions doesn't automatically mean someone will behave morally. So this is especially true for young people who are growing up in a very different environment compared to previous generations. They are influenced by social media, peer pressure, and modern lifestyles that weren't even considered in old research. So that's why we can't simply rely on traditional ambitions. We need to take a fresh look at what morally really means for today's youth and how it actually plays out in their daily lives. Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to research questions, we have come up with 3. So the first one is, how do citizens of Kuala Lumpur perceive religious commitment? And the second research question is, what is the stance of citizens of Kuala Lumpur regarding the importance of religious commitment? And the third one is, how does religious commitment influence moral behavior in citizens of Kuala Lumpur? And when it comes to methodology, we have used qualitative research design, which we interview 6 participants using semi-structured interviews. And these 6 participants, they are actually purposely selected, which are 2 from Christianity, 2 from Islam, and 2 from Buddhism. So they're all 18 years of age or older and are currently residing in Kuala Lumpur. So all this data collected will be analyzed using a thematic analysis. So when it comes to findings, the first research question, how do citizens of Kuala Lumpur perceive religious commitment? So for Muslim, Buddhist, and Christian, they all think that they are dedicated to this faith and they perform rituals like prayers or worship or follow the Bible principles or virtues. Yeah, so for Muslim, the 2 interviewees, they acknowledge they are committed, but not at the highest level. But Buddhists, they believe in core principles, but see the room for growth. And for Christianities, 2 of the Christians, they feel that higher commitment is also linked to active church involvement and supportive faith community. And the second research question, what is the sense of citizens of Kuala Lumpur regarding the importance of religious commitment? So for Muslim and Buddhists, they think that meaningful life is not possible. Meaningful life is possible without strong religious commitment, which this meaningfulness is also subjective. It is shaped by personal values and connection. And for Christians, one of the interviewees, she mentioned that finding Jesus and living like him will bring the true meaning, and it is the center of the life purpose. And the third research questions, how does religious commitment influence moral behavior in citizens of Kuala Lumpur? So for Muslim, they think that morality can exist without religion. And also low religious commitment doesn't mean that a person is bad. And they will follow the religion acts and also Islamic teachings for their life guidance. And for Buddhists, they think that people can be moral without religion as well, same as Muslim. But morality ties more with social responsibility and tradition, and is more cultural and habitual rather than deeply internalized moral guidance. And religion is not the only path to morality. For Christians, there are 2 contrasting point of view. So for interviewee 1, morality is shaped by personal responsibility, societal expectation, or inner guilt, which a person, even though he or she is deeply committed but in religion, but they can behave immorally as well. But for interviewee 4, she thinks that morality rooted in biblical principles and the relationship with God. So it's more of like a love-based guidance following the principles in the Bible, but she also recognizes that morality can develop from societal standards, observation, and education. Yeah.
On discussion of findings, next slide, please. We'll dive into the findings and how we have analyzed them in our research paper. Next slide, please. So with the perception of religious commitment, it is found that religious commitment is defined as a sincere dedication involving both belief and practice amongst the participants. Perceptions by religion are assumed as such. Muslims, Buddhists, and Christians, they focus on inner intention, sincerity, and following God's virtues daily for Muslims, whereas Buddhists emphasize on rituals, traditions, and community service, focusing on the themes of morality and religion instead of the specific teachings. Christians, they highlight prayer, Bible reading, high attention towards the rituals that are correlated associated with a religious commitment, whereas in terms of participant rating in their own commitment, it is largely of a moderate standing, acknowledging imperfection and the room for growth across all participants in the study. Religious commitment is viewed as a blend of belief, practice, and moral living amongst interviewees, and seen as an ongoing personal journey, not fixed in a state. Next slide, please. Importance of religious commitment for a meaningful life in our findings. The majority view that is found is that religious commitment enriches the life, but is not essential for meaningful life. For Muslim and Buddhists, they agree in the point that purpose can come from career, family relationships, and other aspects of life secular towards religion, separate from religion, but Christians. One said that one felt meaning can be found without religiosity through helping others and living the life of morality, whereas the other argued a strong commitment to Jesus is necessary for true meaning beyond worldly success and materialistic endeavors. The prevailing sentiment throughout all these findings is that religion is one of many paths to meaning, but not a universal requirement. We acknowledge that moral standing and moral behavior is something that can exist separate to religious commitment because of the secularization of and pluralization of religious coexistence in urban Kuala Lumpur. Next slide, please. There's also a found relationship between the religious commitment and moral behavior that is highly distinctive in our finding. Next slide. The general takeaway here is that morality is not exclusive to religion, and non-religious people can be moral and vice versa, saying that morality and religion, although they go hand in hand, they are not something that is necessarily influential to each other. They can exist separately as well. Takeaways here driven by separate religions categorized as such is that for Muslims, one stressed that culture and education as primary moral influences is highly essential, whereas the other emphasized that Islam as a moral compass is present, but that secular morality compasses also exist. For Buddhists, one saw that morality is a social responsibility shaped by upbringing and culture instead of religion specifically, while the other applied Buddhist values such as compassion and non-harm taught in Buddhist culture but a form of morality exists outside of religion as well, whereas the Buddhist religion serves as a guidance, but not a strict metric. For Christians, one linked morality to personal conscience and responsibility, noting even devout people can also act immorally, whereas the other identified that morality is closely tied to biblical principles and her relationship with God, though she still recognized that secular ethics also exists. Next slide. For a shared conclusion across our findings, we found that religion provides a guidance and accountability, but it is not the sole or guaranteed source of morality. Again, adjacent and alternative education is also correlated towards a person's moral behavior, and universal values of empathy, culture, reason, education also shape a person's ethics, because being good does not depend on just only being highly religious. This is further emphasizing the pluralistic view that fosters respect and shared moral ground in the multicultural environment of Kuala Lumpur. Next slide.
So for the conclusion of the entire research paper, we see that KL citizens generally perceive religious commitment as a devotion to a faith through belief and practice, and most of them rate their own commitment as quite moderate, not like fully perfect, up to 10. And there's a balance between religious ideals and the realities of modern life. And we also see that deeply religious life is enriching, but it is not required for a meaningful existence of us humans. So most participants believe that purpose in life can be gained from personal values, relationships, achievements that are outside of religious devotion, while a minority indicate that true fulfillment must center on a strong connection with God. And we also see that moral behavior is not fully dependent on religious commitment, although traditions of the religions may promote ethics, and faith also shapes character, but participants also shared that empathy, cultural norms, and education can help guide people to behave morally as well. So the implications for society and interfaith understanding is that the convergence of perspective across different religions show that believers do recognize that someone of a different religion, or even if they have no religion, can still be a moral individual. And this outlook actually encourages a more open conversation and also encourages empathy between different communities. And it also reinforces Malaysia's value of religious tolerance and social harmony. So we conclude that actually public institutions like schools, media, policymakers have the responsibility to promote common values such as honesty, kindness and justice, and faith leaders can acknowledge the diverse sources of goodness in youth's lives and work with that reality. So for the directions, what we recommend for future research is that we recommend to examine a larger and more diverse samples of Malaysian youth, including those from other faiths or explicitly secular backgrounds, maybe like Sikhism or people from Hinduism. And next, to also employ quantity surveys, because what we did was purely qualitative. By employing quantitative surveys, it tests how generalizable these attitudes are and whether other variables influence the relationship between religious commitment and moral behavior. Thirdly, to implement a longitudinal study to explore how these perceptions evolve as people age. And lastly, to also conduct comparative studies between KL and other regions of Malaysia that can be more conservative and rural. Yep. So these are the references that we have used to back up our statements in the research paper. Thank you so much.